As a sportsman, as a cricketer, I opened the batting. So I was against the fastest bowlers in the world. And everyone says, were you frightened? No. Why should I be frightened? Because if I was frightened, I would freeze. There are the 4 Fs: fight, flight, freeze. And the last one was forgiveness. If you don't forgive, you will be inhibited in how you deal with the problem.
John Hendry, welcome. Tell us one moment that changed everything for you.
When I started school, it changed everything for me because I stammered badly. And 2 letters that really disturbed me were S and N. When you say yes, you squeeze air out the top of your tongue and the roof of your mouth. When you say N, your tongue goes to the top of your mouth. I couldn't say S, couldn't say snake or sorry, and I couldn't say no. And this was a really, really challenging thing. And it made me frightened of social circumstances. And starting school was a time where I had to come to grips with, do I let it dominate me or do I not? And thankfully, the teacher, Mr. Railton, understood, never finished a sentence for me, was very patient, and had every student at a very, very small school. There were 35 of us at the school, only 2 teacher school. 7 of us were Caucasian. The rest were Indigenous in the Kamaraganja mission, they were wonderful. But they, likewise, as kids at school, were excited to be at school and were very kind. So really, for me, to overcome fear, I needed a social acceptance of fear. And I thank my parents in many ways because I was securely attached. So I felt secure enough to form relationships, and the relationships I formed were kind to me because I had an impediment, and most people carry impediments and hide them. I was able to share it. And so it was fundamental to me. When you're born, one of the fundamental emotions you have is fear. That's really quite interesting how we deal with that emotion in our infancy and as we grow to the social circumstance, which is all schools are. They're a social circumstance and they've plugged in a bit of education for them as well. But if you have a relational circumstance where you feel secure, then it will still exist because fear is a most important emotion because it keeps you on track.
John, what was the actual fear or fears that sat around the stammering?
Not being able to explain yourself, not being able to be regarded by others as being able to do that. Self-regard is very important to everyone. If it's inhibited in some ways or other and challenged, then we don't feel as resilient, if you like. We lose hope more quickly.
What did that look like as a young child, John? How did that feel? Obviously, you didn't have that language at that age. How were you viewing that fear?
It was always there. It manifested itself in all funny ways. When I was going to sleep at night, I would rock from side to side, my head, roll it, and my mother would come in and say, stop that, stop that, stop that. And fear manifests itself in different ways, in different circumstances for everyone. And everyone that might hear this will have suffered at some stage from a realization that this next moment is going to be challenging. How you manage that is unbelievably important as a little kid. It's damaged by this social regard business. So and why I mentioned the teacher and why it was so important, he never, ever stole hope from me. He never said, what are you talking about? Come on, be patient. Say that again. I was never asked to do something that he didn't feel that I could manage.
John, did you have instances before you went to school where hope was stolen from you?
No, not really. I'm a twin. So my communication with my twin brother was physical as well as everything else. And it never really presented on a scale that was fearful, if you like. But as soon as you go beyond a very secure social circumstance, which might be a family, but from a secure and defined and usually small family circumstance or relational circumstance, because our entire life is lived relationally. Everything is relational. In fact, your health and well-being and my health and well-being, everyone's health and well-being, let alone their performance in life, their engagement, has little to do with your diet. And all research says it's only 20%. And exercise is important, but again, at maximum, for your health and well-being, it's only 20%. 60% is purely determined by the quality of the relationship matrix you form. When you are 2, 3, 4, and 5, there are only a small matrix, and how you're treated in that matrix or how you create that is fundamental to whether you are fearful or not. But then all of a sudden, you have this requirement to move into a social circumstance where the care factor is questionable. So you're meeting peers you don't know their values basis, you don't know their parent, you don't know the adults. And depending on whether you, and this is Bowlby's work, depending on how you look at, can you manage it or can you not? Bowlby just says life is just a series of daring ventures. So in a relational sense, it's really important to feel that you can deal with it well.
Obviously, you had a very, as you said, a good family that was supportive. You had that relational connection to them. What was a moment that you realised that this fear was something that you needed to observe? How did you know that what you had was different to others?
It's in conversation. You knew that you would want to make a contribution, but you denied yourself that opportunity because it was going to be different. The life I lived with myself thankfully positive. I felt in the end that I could rather than I couldn't. So that was really important. And I was lucky in the sense that at the age of 6, a educational psychologist came to the school. I think really because of all the Indigenous kids were there. We all had to recite the months of the year. And of course, I left 2 out. So I left September out and I left November out. And I remember listening to the teacher or the headmaster of the school talking to my father about it. And he said, I laughed when she said to me, John doesn't know the months of the year. And he said to her, he would have left September and November out. And this is the beauty of a really secure relationship. And I looked at relationships like the CPR, if you like, of relationships. You need to be positively connected. That means you are protected. And I was. And I also was respected, and that's really critical for kids. I then did speech therapy, and I learned to sing and to meditate.
How did that impact your self-worth in that moment when younger you chose to leave out September and November as potentially a coping strategy? Moving forward as you got older and needed to go to speech therapy, did that impact your self-worth, knowing that there were differences between you and other children and you needing speech pathology?
My self-worth was okay because I was very good at sport, and that meant in a very small country town, I could run fast, I could catch, I could do all the sorts of things that gave a sense of community worth, if you like, social worth. So I never doubted that, in fact, in the end, that I would be able to overcome. And I still stammer. And when I'm finished a presentation or whenever I finished a lesson, I would always thank the kids for being kind. But it was interesting, my first lesson I ever taught in a small country high school. I wrote my name on the board, it had to be Mr. Hendry in those days. And then under it, I wrote, I stammer, please be kind. Not one student in 50 years of teaching was unkind to me.
I'm so enamored of that comment that you just made about the willingness of your openness to share that with what could have potentially been, I mean, you were in high school. What years were you teaching back then?
I taught from year 7 to year 12.
Right. So kids are not always really kind at that age, and your willingness to disclose that up front, you must have had an incredible sense of self.
My purpose there was to create a really quality relationship with every student I taught. I trusted them. When they made a mistake, I gave them a break. I forgave them. I believed that they would always try to do their best. In every class, no matter what, they would always try to do their best. That they would not try to harm me in any way. And I was always making sure that they had a sense of hope because hope was unbelievably important to me. And also hope is the type of thing that enables you. It's the only emotional ingredient that is of any significance in resilience. All the rest about resilience, whether it's gratitude, empathy, or mindfulness that is now being sold all over the place, is just nonsense. It's not that. It's the resilience comes from the 14th century English term resper, which is the restoration of hope after a period of despair. So hope was really important, and every kid knew I cared for them, irrespective of whether they were able or interested or whatever. I cared for them. So why would they want to make a point? Why would they want to harm? No one has a license to harm under any circumstance. No one can issue that license. So every time I walked to a class, I felt really safe.
John, your work with students is this relationship and trust and hope. Tell us a little bit more about that as a driver for you, why that's so important.
Most people suffer from social dislocation, social fear. That's how will they be regarded by others? And that eats away at their self-regard, because life is with others. And this is the whole well-being area that has been developed. And I plead guilty to being enthusiastic about focusing on health and well-being. We've developed really almost a therapy culture about it. Frank Ferruti wrote a wonderful book, The Fear Culture, which looked at what was disabling people, what was disabling. And the thing that I had to come to grips with was failure, the inability to do something. So failure to me was the starting point, not the end point. And that, Joe, led me to the whole concept of what is a quality relationship. It led me to the whole concept of forgiveness. I had to give myself a break when I couldn't do it. But forgiveness is the enabling thing that has enabled me to get through life. And so everyone, when you mention forgiveness, everyone runs for cover because they think it's a religious. Not at all. It's the only enabling element that exists, because there's no one that will be listening to this that hasn't stuffed up one way or other in their life, that hasn't made a mistake. And they can run away from dealing with it, but eventually you have to come back to deal with it. And I came to this when I was just a kid. I looked at the word forgive and said it's made up of two words, for and give. For me, I took the word for off the front and put it at the back. Give for yourself, John, come on. Give for the class. Give for the team. And that's all forgiveness is. It's giving a chance, giving hope. That's what it was. So I maintain that. And failure, when you fail, you learn more from making a mistake than you do from successes, because you pat yourself on the back with success, but you never analyse and go into detail. Why did I get that wrong? So it was important to overcome, and you come up with strategies.
John, this is such a key point around forgiveness that you're making. And you started by talking about how important relationships are. But this is really talking about your relationship to yourself, which is the core of everything you're discussing. And often look to the external, and that we never go internally and work out what we need. And yet you did. You worked out that I need to give to myself. I need to give myself the opportunity to give some grace and some respect and kindness. And that's a pretty enormous thing to learn at a very young age.
Well, I was taken there because I stammered. I had to think beyond, well, that's it. I can't. Or I might be able to. And that's where hope comes in. And to pick up your point, and we live our lives totally relationally. All the studies on relationships and trust, forgiveness, integrity, hope, and compassion are the fundamental elements. And that is the template of a quality relationship that you have and form. And it was the template that I formed with every person that I've ever shared my life with. When you trust someone, they know. And when you don't, they know. And so these are important things. But the fundamental relationship you've pointed to, the fundamental relationship you have is with yourself. So do you trust yourself? Well, I did. Every now and then, if a teacher wanted to be silly, they would ask me to read out loud. Well, I couldn't do it. So they were just making a point that they were superior. I forgave them for that. That's the whole concept. They hadn't thought about it. they weren't really being cruel. So I had to explain, and this is the storytelling, that every time you do something, every time you have a go at something and you miss out, whether or not the story you tell yourself at that one moment is constructive or destructive. If it's destructive, then you go to blame and shame and, oh, I can't do this, I'm hopeless. Or if it's constructive, then you look at why this might have occurred and you strategize to overcome it. This was really important to me, and it became even more important to me as I grew up through school into secondary school. I was the brunt of what, it's a terrible term and it shouldn't be used, but bullying, where kids used to say, "G'day, John, how you going?" And they were really nice kids. I liked them. I really liked them. And I had to then emotionally control my reaction so that I didn't disturb it and they didn't feel it was a win-win situation for them. And I used to ride my push bike down to the high school, and the closer I got to the high school, the more I became anxious, and I had to overcome that anxiety because these clowns were waiting at the bike rack to say "G'day, Joe," and so on. Years later, I was taking my father for his 90th birthday. I took him down to have his hair cut, and he was blind, and I paid for his hair to be cut this day. And we were walking down the footpath in this small country town where I was raised, and someone was coming towards us, big fellow, my age or thereabouts, and he said, "G'day, Jack," to my father, and my father, blind, said, "Who is it?" And he said his name, and it was the bully.
Oh,
And I had a physiological response immediately, and my father said, "You'd remember, John." And he immediately had a physiological response as well, and immediately said, "I need to apologise to you."
oh my goodness.
Interesting thing that points out is that no matter what you do, it will never go away. So we are burdened with not only the height, our gender, colour of our eyes, our DNA, we're burdened with all our lived experiences. This is why I thought, well, yeah, give yourself a break, John. Over time, and it will take time, and it did take a long time. I still stammer a little bit now. And if I'm tired, I stammer more than if I'm not. But it's nothing that has really deterred me, and because I really think that the relationships I form, I don't know of anyone who really would want to hurt me.
So, John, that's a really deep story to share. In reaching for forgiveness for that man that you met on the street, how do you go through forgiveness in that instance? How do you take yourself through forgiving him?
It's neurologically, the highways are formed in my brain already. It's not a hurdle at all. The most difficult thing is to do it in a way that doesn't harm the other person. This is one of the things that we don't learn ourselves, nor does anyone teach us in the context of how we relate to one another generally. We don't teach people how to apologise, nor do we teach them how to accept an apology. We don't teach people how to forgive, and nor do we teach them how to accept forgiveness. And Hannah Arendt, a wonderful philosopher, says the only tool that is available in any toolbox to enable you to perform at your best in life, to engage, to overcome, is forgiveness.
Tell us how you do that, John. Talk us through what you do.
I look closely at what's occurring, and I look to give rather than take from it. So give to it. We're continually giving. So in any mistake that is made, how can we work together to overcome this mistake? So if someone makes a mistake and it dislocates me in that one moment, my approach is, how can I work with you? Most errors are made in life in a relational sense are probably not intended. Some are, and that takes a little bit more work, but you've got to work together, not work apart. And this is really interesting in our relational circumstances in life. I go back to my primary school teacher. He was continually caring and working with me to overcome the problem. The way we manage our lives generally is adversarial. If someone does something to me, I'm entitled to do something to you. It's a zero-sum game. And in essence, if you want to negotiate life in a constructive and enabling way, you can't be adversarial. You have to be non-adversarial. And I've constructed a whole process, and it took years and years and years, but I had it well and truly in order when I was probably in grade 7. I had it all worked out how it would look in a model sense. The whole concept of the adversarial approach, so you can be adversarial to yourself. You make a mistake, you harm yourself. You whip yourself, you put you through a ritual that and you hurt yourself. That's it. And then in the end, if you do that, your brain will develop highways about that. Your plasticity of your brain will develop you into a person that is really quite adversarial. On the other hand, if you're going to be kind to yourself and you practice that you have to practice it, then you develop highways in the brain. You don't just think, do I forgive this? It is just who you are. And people will know you like that. I've been a teacher to, a colleague to, a friend to, or I don't think you could find someone that said that I was out to harm them.
Well, ahead of your time, can I say, because we live in a construct of power over. You mentioned about the bullies. That's a power over tactic. The teacher
is.
that tells you not okay, it's a power over. And yet, very young in year 7, you worked out a formula that said, I need to have a power with people. I need to have a power with myself and give myself forgiveness. And I need to have a power with everybody that I come across. It's just an incredible insight. And you can hear it in your voice. That's how you live. You have a gentle approach that is about engaging with people and being on their side and being on your side. I'm completely and utterly in awe of that, John.
Well, it's interesting. One thing that I really found difficult to understand was why people were not performing at their best. What were the things that were choking them? Even when I was at school, I couldn't understand why. When I started teaching, I couldn't understand why my students were not performing at their best, nor were my colleagues. What were the inhibiting factors that were there? And it goes to the adversarial thing, where people were being self-critical or critical of others. And where did that come from? Well, it was captured really nicely when in the infantile industry that's still embryonic psychology, and B.F. Skinner, who came up with the idea that fear is the thing that motivates. It doesn't. It disables. It doesn't motivate. It certainly doesn't motivate, and nor does it draw you to be able to maintain attention because you are fearful all the time. And I found that in sporting contests where you're tested all the time and where people try to get you off your game. So they annoy you, they tag you, they abuse you. What are they trying to do? They're trying to get you away from performing at your best. So this took me to reading way back in the 60s about attachment theory and about flow. Bowlby's work is fundamental. No one has given more to human existence than Bowlby, and much more than Freud. Because if you're secure, then you believe you can. If you're insecure, you believe you may not be able to. Secure people are more able to practice forgiveness and are more able to develop the brain architectural capacity to originally approach any circumstance in a forgiving way. The insecure ones are not certain, and they find it far, far, far more difficult to give themselves a break. Oh, I've done it again, rather than to give someone else a break. Well, they've done it again to me. Look what it meant to me. I heard the other day someone say it was unforgivable. Nothing is unforgivable. 40 years ago now, I wrote to the Mayo Clinic and asked, had they ever done any research on the physiological impact of forgiveness? And they hadn't, but they'd done a research excursion into holding grudges. If anyone that's listening to this and they doubt this business about how forgiveness really is important to them in their lives, then they should ask the Mayo Clinic for a 1.5-page article on the physiology, the physiological benefits of forgiveness. It is fascinating. And I had experienced that.
John, talk us through how you go about forgiveness. What does that look like for you? How do you do that step by step? So that whether it was that incident with that bully, whether you met up with him with your father in his moment of saying he was sorry, or in fact, if he hadn't said he was sorry, talk us through how you actually give or have forgiveness.
It's intuitive. And the reason it's intuitive is my brain is structured so. So when I make a mistake, I'm still annoyed by it and I'm still frustrated by it and I'm still, oh, I've done it again, but I don't go back. So what I'm attempting to say is that resilience is in fact the restoration of hope. So when I make a mistake, I recognize I've made the mistake and no one else might know I made it. In the story that I tell, remember we talked about whenever something happens, we tell a story about it to ourselves. I tell constructive stories. So the first word I say when I'm pointing out to myself that, John, you've done it again, the first word I say is and. And allows me to go forward. If I said but, I would say it's not my fault. It was too hot. The trousers were too tight. My shoes didn't fit. If it was a sporting thing, the cricket bat was too heavy or I wasn't ready. So what I've established. And is it burdensome? No, it's not. It's the opposite because I don't have to fight myself. I have to be constructive rather than destructive. I've got no welts on my back. Since I retired, I've had open heart surgery. I've had melanomas taken off my face. I've had a hernia. I trusted the surgeon, even though he was a boy I taught. I trusted the surgeon who over 100 stitches on my face. Why did I trust him? I had a relationship with him. Where did it come from? I coached him in cricket in the past. So all of a sudden, we have our relational matrix reappears, and it's part of our lives. Fear has not curtailed my in any way. As a sportsman, as a cricketer, I opened the batting. I was against the fastest bowlers in the world, and everyone says, were you frightened? No. Why should I be frightened? Because if I was frightened, I would freeze. And so I go back to the reptilian brain, right? There are the 4 Fs: fight, flight, freeze, and the last one, forgiveness. And it is the only one of those 3 that enable you to push through the midbrain into the cortex, the frontal cortex, to make a sensible decision. So if you don't forgive, you will be inhibited in how you deal with the problem.
John, how do you do that? You've talked us beautifully through your intuitive ability to self-forgive. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that may be wondering, how do you forgive others in that moment? So how do you forgive others?
It's simple in the sense that whether they intend to harm or whether the harm was unintended, the only way that we can resolve this circumstance, we can build forward or destroy. The only way we can build forward is for me to empower them to work with me. If I become angry, then I can't think. Now, I will be angry for a moment, so I have to overcome that. And the best work that's been done on that has been done out of Yale by Mark Brackett and the whole business of ruler. So you recognise your emotional state. Now, everyone's emotional. I get angry. I say physiologically is really important. So understand how it impacted you, right? Then label it, actually say, I'm angry. And then express the anger in a way that's not going to harm you or anyone else. So, oh, no. And then be self-compassionate. Care about yourself and care about the other person. And people will know very quickly that you've been hurt, but you care about them. And I say that we can work through this and it will overcome. And they won't want to hurt me. I need to discover what was the reason that, and then the only way I can discover that is to work with them. I can make it up, but it won't be real. So you have to work with people. So I do it intuitively.
John, I'm hearing you say what you're doing is finding a way to get on the same page with the other person.
Yes, I need to understand where they are, because most of the time they are feeling insecure and they want to make you feel insecure. I want them to be secure and I want to stay secure. These are really interesting things. And this is why I go back and say we need to have a template on how, and this is what Joe's asking for with regards to forgiveness. We need to have a template on what is a quality relationship. We need to have a template on how we manage constructively the inevitable error or misjudgment that we make, because we do all the time. We don't have all the information to make these decisions at all. And fear, going back to the reptilian brain, fear stops you. Fear absolutely stops you. So you freeze. So you're unable to think through carefully a strategy that's going to remove that fear.
We know with fear, isn't it, John? And I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but it disconnects us from our wisdom. It disconnects from our prefrontal cortex, which means
Yes,
we've
you
got...
can't get there.
You can't get there. I mean, all of us have experienced a time where we've been... I'm going to use the word tapped. There's a lot of energy coming and it's quite powerful. It feels power over. It's a bit like we become a deer in a headlight. We can't make sense of anything. We can't construct a response that has any meaning. And that's when you go into that fight, flight, freeze or appease mode. What you're really saying is maybe by expressing the emotion that sits there with the anger, you go, taking a breath and reducing all of the hormones that are making you want to go into that fight flight, that we actually find a pathway to start to say, well, hang on a sec, is there more to this story? Do I need to understand this person better? But in that fear state, none of that's ever going to happen.
No, well, that's exactly right. And in fact, fear is a very interesting thing in that it prompts a physiological response, which they've been able to trace very carefully. And the hormonal effect of fear is disabling, totally disabling. And somewhere along the line, we need to not get fear to this stage. Fear is important, but we need not let it get to the stage that it chokes us. So you can be aware of an anxiety. You can be aware of how do you calm yourself down in that. Do you go for a run, punch a hole in the wall? Do you swear? What do you do? My great fortune in life was at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I continue, is to meditate. So meditation was for me the calming, the soothing aspect for me individually. And when I'm dealing with other people and people are angry or anxious, my whole approach is to soothe them, because then we can start to constructively work together, and then we can find a solution to the thing that has caused the concern. And it may not be the best solution, but one of the really interesting things is that people believe that you're working with them, not doing things to them. And that has to be real, not pretense, because they can see through pretense. Little kids can see through pretense. And we're all teachers, by the way. Babies teach their parents. We can all see through. And if you steal hope from someone, and you might inadvertently you steal hope, I say to people, please don't steal hope, because you can never give it back. People think you're not serious.
John, I just love the way throughout your whole life has been woven this lovely, strong pathway of early years where you could have been overcome and frozen by fear. Instead, you learnt ways to accept yourself, to calm yourself, to have your own back, to have self-love and self-compassion. And then you've given that forward to others through your life. You've also been able to soothe others and be with others, and you've forgiven yourself and you've forgiven others. So you've, from such a young age, had such a strong passion and legacy that has overseen your whole life.
I had one further consolidation of it. On my 17th birthday, my brother and I, it had been a wonderful day. I had playing football and done remarkably well and been signed to play with the superstars, and I'm still at school. And we were sitting at home with the sponge cake with 17 candles on it, not a wealthy family. The next door neighbour in this small country town knocked on the door and said, "Is Don home?" My younger brother was 12 and a half. This was at 6 o'clock at night. So, it's a small country town that knocks at the door, says something's happened. Anyway, it was an accident on the highway, and cut a long story short, he was knocked off his bike and died. And my parents had to switch the life support off that night. And the fellow who was driving, unfortunately, drunk. He was a lovely bloke. He just had one too many drinks. How do you manage that in a sense that we've been talking about? The next day, the driver was brought round to our place by his wife. This is a small country town. Everyone knows everyone. And I went to the front door, and there he was. And he wanted to see my father. My father was cutting wood and crying. And I went down, and everyone was there. And it was like, sponge cakes everywhere. People don't know what to say. These two men thought, I'll go out with my father. And they knew one another. In fact, the fellow actually worked in an area where my father was in charge. And he was a really nice bloke. His son was at school with me. Lovely fellow. And they sat and not much was talked. And then my father said that he forgave him. And his wife was driving the car. She came in and there were hugs. And I said, "Dad, what's going on? What's going on here?" And he just repeated what I said to you, in the sense that he said, "If I don't forgive, I will not be much of a father to you and your brother, or a husband to your mother, and it'll disable me forever. Don's not coming back." And that consolidated for me the whole concept of what life is about, and that we need to be kinder, not only to ourselves, but to all those that we are fortunate enough to share it with. And too many people don't. And that means, in my estimation, that they are underperforming in the contributions that they could make to others and to themselves, in whatever their mission in life might be.
How amazing is it that your father, in that very dark moment in your family's life, was able to forgive someone in such a way that he knew was vital for him. He knew it was vital to model to you as a father. Not only did it consolidate, as you said, your purpose and your trajectory to be with others in a way of compassion, self-compassion, forgiveness, but what an amazing gift he gave himself. Thank you so much for sharing that really personal moment. It's very touching. It's very powerful. Thank you, John.
Well, every culture is determined by how we treat one another. Multiculturalism, multi-faith, no faith, all likes and dislikes. If we have a toxic culture where trust doesn't exist, where forgiveness is just seen as the weakest way you could ever respond, people are taking advantage of you. If that's the case, and the media jumps on it at the moment, and politically it goes back, we're being adversarial. It's unhelpful. Joe, if I could just finish by saying, don't be fearful, but be aware that fear is important, but be brave. Be brave and by being so, then you will be able to support other people and primarily support yourself.
Thank you, John. And is there anything else? We often end with what's been the greatest gift. Perhaps you've already shared that. Is there anything else or any other tips that you wanted to share?
The only thing that enables a relationship to endure and grow is when you build it on the basis of giving, not taking. In the formation of a relationship, we should be teaching children that the purpose of a relationship is to enable others and themselves to live in harmony with one another. So give. And I ask so many, do you want to be known as a giver or a taker in a relationship? Unfortunately, the latter end up alone and destroy not only themselves, but the lives of those that they. So really, if you form a relationship on the contribution, the benefit you can take, the adding value to it, rather than what you can get from it and the benefit you can get, because usually if you form it on that basis, As soon as the benefit you're gaining dissipates, then you're out of that relationship. It's transactional as opposed to transformative. I just encourage everyone to be brave. We all make mistakes. We all suffer from fear. We all doubt ourselves at times. But tell the constructive rather than destructive stories in those moments of great challenge. And you can go forward rather than camp where you are or even go back.
Thank you, John, for your very wise words, and thank you for sharing a lot of your journey with us. It has been such a pleasure spending time with you, John.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for being kind to me.
Okay, that's our episode for today of What's Fear Got to Do with It. Thanks so much for your company. We hope you found it insightful and it left you with some helpful tips from our guests and some great points for you to reflect on. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Substack or follow us on your favourite platform. Leave a review. We'd love to know your thoughts. Maybe you'd like to be a guest or you know someone who you would like to hear their story. Reach out to us on Insta at whatsfear_podcast or email us at info@whatsfear.com. All the guests' show notes are below to find their tips. And until next time, from Jo and I, take care, stay curious and keep the conversation going.